I was out to call the planning and zoning meeting together. We're now in order and we have minutes on the table.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. We got tonight, the main reason for our meeting tonight, Mr. Dennis Peterson, Director of GIS Services, and Miss Suzanne White, who does not have a card. Suzanne, I'm going to have to get you some cards.
I know.
I'll call my friend the governor and get your cards.
That's
Anyway,
right.
they're here to make a presentation regarding GIS and how that would affect flooding. Tom, is
Well,
that correct?
no,
You
it's,
want to
Well, we just did a project with the Corps that if it goes successfully, I anticipate we'll be doing more of those projects with the Corps, watershed by watershed. My hope is this project that Dennis and Suzanne are spearheading will get us some of the data that the Corps that could then use in lieu of us having to pay the Corps to reinvent the wheel.
Okay.
It's not mimicking what the Corps is doing by any stretch of the imagination, but what it is doing, I think, is providing the type of data that the Corps may need to start their study, if that makes sense. And I'm going to let Suzanne and Dennis elaborate on that.
Before they start, can I give my rendition of the
Yeah.
problem we had with flooding?
Sure.
I'm a farmer. He's a farmer. There's a couple, he's got back there at the farm. I have never seen a person build a 5-foot fence, 47-inch fence, with the top strand of barbed wire beside a creek, and the water come up so fast that the cows, he had 5 steers in there, came up so fast, the cows swam across the top of that fence, went under a bridge, and came on the other side of the creek, which is Spencer Creek. We're having anomalies, flood anomalies. And for that reason, we're trying to get a grasp on where not to build and what's going to aggravate future flooding. So that, sir, you take off and tell us who you are and what you do.
Very good. No, I
And
appreciate it.
Run over, whatever. I'm going to sit over and close her and look at her.
And be sure you cover the cost.
Sir?
Oh, yeah.
But I told him to be sure he covers the cost.
There you go.
That's what I think's reasonable.
Well, I appreciate it. And I'm excited to be here in Lebanon with you all tonight. Again, just to introduce myself, Dennis Peterson, Director of GIS Services. I'm with the Department of Finance Administration in the STS, which stands for Strategic Technology Services. It's basically the IT arm for state government. Okay, and so we were here. When I say we, FNA and the leadership back then was in Wilson County back about 20 years ago when we brought the Tennessee Base Mapping Program to this county, worked with the county assessor and this office here and you all. Maybe some of you weren't here 20 years ago. I know Tom was here, I think.
Jerry was here, but he was in a different capacity.
Right.
Bobby was here in a different capacity.
But we brought
Same
what we did with the Tennessee Base Mapping Program 20 years ago was we helped jumpstart the use of GIS and digital mapping technology across the state. And so we're back again with some other plans to expand on what we built 20 years ago. Some of you may, and I'll just give a quick show. This is our main landing page where we talk about the base mapping program, and I'm sure some of you are familiar with the property map viewer.
Mm-hmm.
So we work closely with the Comptroller of the Treasury and Division of Property Assessments in hosting this property viewer application, where we've built out all the parcel data across the whole state and make this available for the public.
Now,
To act-
you
yes,
if
sir.
members of the committee are not familiar with this, you really need to be, because it helps you identify the parcel, owner, acreage, etc. And I use quite a bit of it. So.
Yes, sir. And so we coordinate statewide mapping programs. We build mapping applications, as you can see here. And so what I wanted to talk about today, let me switch over to my PowerPoint, is a program that's being led by the U.S. Geological Survey. USGS, which is sort of the lead mapping agency within the federal government. They have a program called 3D hydrography, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Specifically, what we want to do is work with USGS and build out a new GIS layer of surface water or hydrography, inland lakes, rivers, streams, etc. And what we want to do is leverage other digital map data, specifically digital elevation models, to extract these new water features, very detailed and accurate new set of water features. And there's been, it's a new program just getting off the ground now. There's been no development of this data in Tennessee to date. But we want to start here in Middle Tennessee, and we want to work with you all and others in Middle Tennessee and starting to build this data across our state. And so my role is to really communicate and coordinate with local government, with state agencies, with federal agencies, and pooling our resources together to help fund these mapping programs. So what are we talking about? We talk about elevation and hydrography. Well, there's a program that we just finished with USGS in mapping very accurate digital terrain data through technology called LiDAR, light detection and ranging. And so what you see on top there is the bare earth hillshade that was collected for the entire state over a 5-year program called 3D Elevation Program, or 3DEP, 3D Elevation Program, 3DEP. And so what that did is, what you see in the upper left was an older data set from 40 years ago that was very inaccurate, out of date. And so USGS created this new set of data, working with my department, getting funding from local governments, state agencies. So now we have in the upper right corner there, statewide 1-meter resolution digital terrain data that's useful for a variety of mapping applications, for floodplain modeling. We provide this, we work with FEMA, and they use this LiDAR elevation data to support their mapping activities. Department of Transportation uses this data for a lot of their work. So what we're doing is we're building on what we've already created at the top there, and we're creating a new set of water features. And so the lower left is what's currently been developed by USGS and what's called the National Hydrography Data Set, or NHD, which in many cases, what they did is they took paper maps and digitized all the blue lines on paper maps to create a digital version of that data that can be used in GIS and mapping and analysis. Well, that data, and I'll show some examples here, it's old, out of date, inaccurate. So what we're wanting to do is create what's shown here in the lower right. A very more detailed, fully functional, networked, with flow direction, set of new hydrography data, inland rivers and streams and lakes, what have you. And the technology that we're talking about is using the elevation models you see in the upper right and some automated rules to extract those water features from the terrain data. It's called elevation-derived hydrography. And
What's the contour differences on it? Because you're picking up all the ditches on the right-hand side.
The elevation models in the upper right supports a 2-foot contour.
Okay. Bottom of the same thing.
Well, the the bottom is just the water features that's
Okay.
extracted from the elevation data.
Dennis, would that you're looking at at that level of detail, is it including wet weather conveyance in that network, or is that all just stream data?
That's ditch.
Yeah, I
Ditch,
mean,
main,
you're
everything.
getting down to,
Well, ditch would be wet weather conveyance.
Yeah, I
yes.
think.
The short answer is yes.
Okay, thank
yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's what I was wanting to get at.
So, sort of the high level goals for the 3D hydrography program is to model this after the elevation program, which I just showed you some of the data there. So basically, the way this works is, as the state GS coordinator, I submit proposals to USGS for particular mapping projects. And they, at the USGS, they manage this at a nationwide level, and they work with contractors, business partners that actually create this data, okay? So we wouldn't be hiring the contractor, the mapping contractor. We would work through USGS, and they would hire the contractor to create this data. But my role, again, is to coordinate with local officials like yourself, state agencies and federal agencies, in submitting proposals. And I'll get to this in a little bit here, of the geographic extent of what we're talking about in terms of this proposal. So why is this important? Well, there was a study that was done a few years ago that identified some of the benefits and the uses of this newly enhanced surface water data set. Flood risk management, water resource management, urban regional planning, river stream flow management, and water quality. There's a variety of others as well. They did a very in-depth study, and they actually went to the detail of identifying or quantifying the annual benefits in terms of, millions of dollars. So the estimated current annual benefits is $538 million. And this is talking about on a nationwide level, okay? Estimated future benefits are $602 million, again, at a nationwide perspective. So this isn't just for Wilson County, it's not for Tennessee, but this program is truly nationwide in scope. So the data that we're talking about creating through this 3D hydrography program would replace what I showed you earlier in that national hydrography data set. And to my knowledge, and Suzanne talked to Julie and Tom, that there is an existing hydro layer that was developed locally here. So what we're talking about is replacing that data set with this new NHD, or I'm sorry, the new 3D HP data. And that NHD data has several quality issues associated with it. And I'm going to kind of go through some of these here briefly. So what you're looking at here is the gray area is that bare earth elevation model. What you see also is the blue line streams from the National Hydrography data set. And so you can see how they don't align with each other, right? The green circles are simply highlighting areas where those blue line streams don't align with the new elevation data, right? Because if you think about it, there's a very close relationship between terrain and water flow, right? Well, that data that was digitized 40 years ago from those paper maps don't align with this new elevation data that was created within the last 5 years.
So basically, like in that oblong green circle in the kind of top center, you can see where the topography or the data, the terrain model is on the upper side and the blue line stream is down below it. If that were a line, that blue line stream would be in the middle of that crevice, correct?
Yes.
Right.
So there's alignment issues. They're not spatially aligned with each other. Here's some other examples in Sevier County. I'll go through these fairly quickly. Here is one we found from Wilson County. So you can see obviously the depression in the terrain to the right of the blue line stream. That's where the blue line stream should be, but with the federal NHD data from 40 years ago, you can see where it doesn't line up.
When was that data? You say 40 years ago?
40 plus years is when they
The
created
NHD
that.
data.
No.
I'm not. I think the stuff that we have that was developed locally was probably from 2010, if I had to guess.
Most of the topo maps that go back, they go back into the fifties.
Oh yeah.
So that's
Yeah, it
a lot
varies.
older than
It
40.
varies across the state as
It
to
does.
what, how old it is.
Basically, Jerry, I think you're talking about them scanning those blue lines off of the old USGS quad maps.
That's what I'm talking about. Most
Yeah.
of those, some of those go back to 50, 55.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So there's also features in that NHD data that doesn't correspond to the terrain, as you can see here. There's a blue line stream, a straight line through the middle of the map there, but the terrain, underlying terrain, doesn't support that or validate that hydro feature. And there's others where at the lower bottom of the screen here, where it shows the blue line stream going up and down over
Over a mountain.
a mountain, a ridge.
It doesn't do that anymore.
It doesn't do that anymore,
Okay.
believe it or not.
Okay.
There's missing features that the terrain could support a blue line stream or other types of digital water features. Here's another example in Wilson County.
Where in Wilson County is that?
That is a good question. I don't know off the top of my head. It's probably
Town.
It could be. It could very well be.
but if you look at the lower right in particular, you can kind of see the terrain, how it could support an actual blue line stream, but the actual
There's
vector
There's
lines.
blue line stream there, just no blue line on
Right,
Right.
exactly.
it. You can tell that.
So that's what we're trying to fix here.
The map
This-
database doesn't reflect the feature.
Pardon?
The map database that we have doesn't reflect the feature.
Correct.
There's other inconsistencies with how the data was digitized, 40 plus years ago, where you can kind of see how in the middle of the area of the map here, it was more densely collected, where the surrounding areas weren't as digitized to the same level of quality. So there's inconsistency in terms of the density of the features that were collected. And then you mentioned the Wilson County data. You said it was from 2010 or 2011.
Think about that. I'm not positive. But
So we just wanted to show this as well. So there's really two types of data. There's the NHD, the federal hydrography data that's 40 plus years old, and then there's the data from early 2010s that we're looking at here from Wilson County. And as you can see, we've mapped out the Huck 12 watershed. So you got the Spencer Creek watershed here, with the gold lines or the yellow lines are the water features from the most current Wilson County data set. And then this is the federal NHD data of that same Spencer Creek Huck 12 watershed. So you can see that there's some discrepancy, and if you overlay both of them together, they're not spatially aligned. There's data in the NHD data that's not present in the Wilson County data, and vice versa. So what we're trying to do is get a consistent, more complete data set that has flow direction, that supports modeling, and the 3D features associated with those water features.
When you say modeling, define modeling.
It allows you to project like water flow and to project if there's a particular rain event, what the flood impacts would be on that particular terrain.
it's basically what
We're
you're
trying-
asking the Corps
We're trying to do, yes.
on the Spencer Creek one
Yes, sir.
specifically.
Yes, sir.
The only difference is they would have this data set that we don't have to pay them, nor do they have to go out and collect manually themselves, which hopefully would cut down the cost on future watershed.
Okay.
So where are we now? So as I mentioned earlier, we're just starting in Tennessee here with this program. And we've talked with folks at the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Tennessee Valley Authority. As you can imagine, they have interests from a variety of their needs for river navigation. TDOT and their environmental division has a need for this type of data. Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation for water quality, they have a stake in this data. We've gotten commitments from Davidson County to be a partner with this program. We're also talking with Williamson, and obviously we're here tonight with you all to gauge your level of interest in this. And the goal is to establish a contract with USGS to develop this data statewide. The first step in this process is to develop a pilot project. And what we've done is identified a watershed near the Knoxville area. The Holston River Huckten watershed encompasses the northeastern portion of Knox County, portions of Granger, Hamblin, and Union counties. And so what we're wanting to do is to test the process, right? We haven't done this before. So we want to work with our contractor and USGS to get a sample data set that we can get comfortable with, to get feedback on the process of how this data is created, and to showcase the benefits of this data. So we're currently finalizing our contract with USGS. We're going to be acquiring the Holston watershed data in the next few months once that contract is finalized. But we're also positioning ourselves for a larger project in Middle Tennessee for FY24.
That would be July 1st of 23 to June of 24.
Correct.
Your beta test is at Blaine in East Tennessee.
Yes.
That's this year, this fiscal
Yeah,
year.
I'm saying that.
Yes. Yes, sir.
Crucial performance.
That's right. So here's the map of what the project area is going to consist of for Middle Tennessee. There's 6 Huck 8 subbasins. And so you got the Lower Cumberland Old Hickory Lake Huck 8 subbasin that takes in probably 90% of Wilson County. So we've added to that the Lower Cumberland Sycamore, which is mainly Davidson County, the Harpeth, which is Williamson, the Stones, Rutherford, and then the Lower and Upper Duck Huck 8 subbasins. That's the geographic extent of the project area that we're proposing for Wilson County to be part of.
That would basically, if this project were to come to fruition, it would cover more detailed data for approximately 90% of Wilson County. Probably even a little more than that, probably 95% of Wilson County. The Stone River watershed, i.e. the Smith Fork Creek, would be the only part of Wilson County that this project wouldn't cover. Because Smith Fork drains to the Caney Fork, and that's to the east. It's not a part of this project. But the Stones River, Percy Priest, and the Cumberland River, upper and lower,
Cover that.
Is the entirety of Wilson County, with the exception of that small little portion that's Smith Fork Creek in its trips.
So here's some examples of what the data, the water features would look like when you overlay it on top of the bare earth elevation. This is a sample data set we got from the state of Oregon. USGS is doing pilot projects, and they've shared with us this data. So you can see it's a very, very detailed stream network. What was the term you used earlier? The
Wet weather conveyance.
wet weather conveyance. So you can see it's very, very detailed in terms of the density of those features. Not only,
Is the wide blue portion got to be considered flooded area?
that's a lake.
Is that a lake? Okay.
Yeah, it's a dammed lake.
You would overlay your FEMA flood layers over this data still. But that's the other thing that this benefits is when FEMA comes in and does additional studies, they have what's called discovery, and in Discovery, we would be handing them this data to start their model, which will, in the end, result in a more accurate FEMA floodplain model.
So here's what it looks like in
Mhm.
3D. And again, just some more examples of the level of detail associated with the water features draped over the elevation data. So what are we talking about here in terms of cost? The estimated cost for the entire project area, those 6 Huckgate subbasins, is about $1.7 million. We have funding commitments from Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation, $340,000. Tennessee Department of Transportation, $583,000. Davidson County has committed $100,000. And so we're trying to get to about 70 to 75% of the total cost. So I can go to USGS and submit that as a proposal in September, October timeframe of this calendar
Sure.
year or fiscal year FY24, right? So the ask is $100,000 from Wilson County to be part of this mapping project. We're still waiting on Williamson County's commitment.
Has this been presented with County?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's been it's been probably 2 months ago, late December, I believe. It was presented to the GIS director in the county, city of Brentwood, and city of Franklin. And they
Did Rogers Anderson see this?
no, we have not presented it to the county commission, but we did present it to the GIS leads within the county and the cities there in Williamson. And they, in turn, have communicated their desire to participate in this and are working through the budgeting process within the county, Williamson
Which
County.
is effectively where I'm starting with y'all.
Tell me what ROI is gonna be in this for us. Explain that.
Return on investment.
Yeah.
Yes.
You want to take a stab at that relative
So
to the Corps' work? I mean, you shared with
honestly,
me the.
I don't know what the Corps will accept in lieu of them going out there and doing their own manual data, but I can't imagine that what they're collecting here is going to be unsatisfactory for beginning to model off of.
Well, we'll ask them tomorrow.
Now, that being said, I kind of feel like the horse is out of the barn on the Spencer Creek watershed. We're already committed to doing that.
Correct.
We've got the money, supplement and everything else. What my idea was going forward, perhaps the other core projects might have a little bit of cost savings associated with each watershed you proceed to.
If we can provide this.
If we
data.
can provide this data that they don't have to go out and collect.
But let's get down to right down to the ground level. He's creating water conveyances and you're talking about them. You're creating them. So how are we gonna project flooding and
Well,
critical lots?
that's what the core modeling
Supposed to do.
hopefully will help us do. But here's the deal. Each one of those sub watersheds, like the Spencer Creek watershed, is $175,000
Yes, sir.
roughly. $175,000 to $200,000.
Yes, sir.
This is a $100,000 contribution for roughly 90 to 95% of Wilson County's data collection. Now, I'm not saying that
Now, is Spence Creek included in the initial one?
Spencer Creek will get this data for Spencer Creek as well as the remainder of Wilson County, save the Smith Fork watershed, and any other tribs that go to the county for it.
But all your data is corrected data by LiDAR, correct?
It's extracted from LiDAR elevation data, yes.
Eliminating all the old maps.
In some respects, I don't know how I've not read in detail the contract of work. I did forward it to Suzanne so she could look at, and Suzanne may be able to tell us a little bit more about what the Corps is planning on doing in terms of data collection. But I wouldn't be surprised if they aren't doing their own LiDAR project
Could be.
to accumulate the data necessary to do the model. Which
Suzanne, you want to address that?
Could we possibly move? If we decided to do this, could we make a decision to change where we were originally going to have the core from Spencer Creek
We
to the
don't
section
need, we
that's not
don't need to
covered
do
by
this, need to be in addition to.
Because then we're doubling up,
well,
so could we do another portion of the county that this doesn't cover?
That might be something. I would not suggest that we change horses in the middle of the stream on the core with Spencer Creek.
Correct.
What I would suggest is that perhaps if you're worried about that one portion of the county that this doesn't cover, you could ask the Corps to do the Smith Fork watershed next. Now, I want to back up and talk about both sides of the fish here. Smith Fork area is probably our least
Least
developed
problem. Yeah.
portion
Least-
area of the
yes,
county
yes,
right
yes,
now, whereas a lot of the northern sections of the county in the Cumberland River watershed, as well as the Stones River watershed to the southwest, are heavily developing, whether it's inside the city limits of Lebanon, Mount Juliet, or out in the county. And that's where I see this being a benefit, because it's going to cover those areas. And as are the core projects, they're just doing it
If y'all
incrementally.
don't need to coordinate with the Corps as to what you're doing,
Because the
what
core
you're
probably
doing.
did the same side.
We've reached out to the Corps and they're
In terms of this
they're
portion of the
evaluating
project,
this, and
Mhm.
we
probably
haven't
collect
gotten any
data in a
firm
similar
commitments on funding
Who
from the
you
Corps.
dealing with the Corps?
But we're only,
The GIS manager, I can't recall his name off the top of my head.
I don't have their names in front of me, Dennis, try to help you.
I've got a
Yeah.
folder at
Is that
home.
Barry? Is it Barry Moran?
No,
He's one
Barry.
of the engineers.
no, he's not the GIS
Ashley
coordinator.
Fuentes is one I've been dealing with
Yeah.
Yeah.
lately.
She's the one brought
Um,
contact up there.
Mhm.
Yeah, I can't recall the GIS manager of the Corps, but we've communicated our desire to work with USGS and develop this data set.
Tom, let me ask you a question. We're on go with the Corps,
Uh-huh.
and they've got some kind of, access to LiDAR, whatever.
They're gonna collect the data some way,
That-
whether it's
that is
out there in the
correct.
field or
But now-
doing LiDAR.
That, and Spencer Creek has been our primary
Uh-huh.
look. Should we move from secondary and tertiary from Barton Spring to Spencer Creek, not Spencer Creek, but to,
Smith Fork,
Smith, no. Down where it dumps into Stone Creek.
Suggs Creek?
Yeah. Should we move that because of the population density there?
I don't know, I hadn't thought about it, cause y'all had prioritized those
Mhm.
other three watersheds in committee, so I
Right,
wasn't gonna
right.
argue with that. I bet Suggs Creek certainly has its own, if you
Well-
wanna talk about having some drainage
Right.
problems, Suggs Creek has them.
What
And
do you
some of
think,
that's
Tom?
surface water, some of it's karst.
I kind of think we may be getting the cart before the horse with all this.
We're just studying it right now. We're
I
not committed.
understand that, but we've appropriated money to go with the Corps
That's
on
correct.
Spencer Creek.
That's correct.
And depending on what that data comes back and all, at that point's when we need to decide if we're headed in the right direction for
That
as
is
the
correct.
taxpayers are concerned. We can spend all the money in the world, but if
Sure.
they don't come back with
With what we
ways to
want.
help these people that we can afford to do or find funds to do with, I hope we're not gonna continue on putting money into
We
something.
will not.
And I know that. So,
But my question to you is, if we do continue on and we do have good data, and these people, we get involved with them also, should Suggs Creek in that area of the county be our second priority and not?
well, of course I would say so, that's my area. I mean, that's as honest as I can be.
And for our fine guest
And
here,
of course, the whole
they need to know
Percy
that you're out here
watershed.
digging those water conveyances while Tom's trying to figure out how to stop them up. So,
And the question I have, as far as collecting data like this, Mr. Jerry told you I was a farmer, I'm a part-time farmer, but I deal with the construction industry quite often.
he's with the county road department.
And
Okay.
I'm smart enough to know with water, every time we allow something to be elevated as far as construction is concerned, that changes all your data immediately, correct?
Parking lot,
Well, I mean,
rooftop.
if we take this table as a,
The terrain does
watershed.
change, yeah.
and I fill this end, I change your data down here, I change your data up here. And this
It's
county,
constantly
it's
changing.
it's constantly changing now in our county. Everything that's built commercially especially, first thing happens is months and months worth.
And the velocity of that change getting faster and faster.
Yes, sir. So,
Yeah, you're
I'm
right.
not trying to down
No,
what
you're
you're telling
correct.
me here, but I'm trying to understand, is it worthwhile to have what you do today, will it be good next year, as far as Wilson County is concerned? Is that a legitimate question? I'm not trying to, be discouraging.
No, I understand where you're coming from. You're right. The terrain does change, and we're actually in talks with other agencies and USGS about updating the terrain data that we collected over the past 5 years, because various parts of the state, for development reasons and other reasons, does change the terrain, and that affects flow. And you're correct.
I will say, Tommy, you're right. On a lot of commercial development, they'll build up a pad, and that changes the terrain.
Large
Yeah,
areas
large
for a
pad,
pad.
particularly
Acres and
multi-acre
acres amount
building,
of time,
yeah.
you know.
So they're gonna build a pad, and they do the same thing in residential. Spencer Creek, Spence Creek subdivision actually did that. They built, and it's in the city, but I can speak to it.
That's gonna cause a lot of problems.
They built up a pad and did a letter of map revision with FEMA and got it approved. The rest is history. But where it's a benefit is right now, whether it's City of Lebanon or City of Mount Juliet or the county or Watertown, if we have a big development come in, commercial or residential or otherwise, we're going to ask them to model their drainage plans, and we're going to ask them to. They're going to base that model. Their engineer is going to base that model off of data that's readily available to them, which right now is the old National Hydrography set, or at the very best, the Wilson County Hydrography set, and it may or may not include a comprehensive set of water that's contributing, or waterways that are contributing to that watershed they're modeling. So effectively, by having this data, you can get a better model both on our end, but also from the things we're reviewing. They're going to have a better model to start from and have a more accurate reflection of what when they have to project what a storm is going to do in terms of water rise. This will give them their engineers a better idea.
Well, this program
In
will
design.
complement what they're doing if they don't
Yeah.
have a similar program like it. I don't know if
Right.
they do or not. Do you know if they do or not? LiDAR?
Well, most of the time they're buying their data from us,
They're gonna get
You
the
know.
LiDAR data from
from the
the
state.
feds,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
public data, so they'll use the data we collected from that.
But if you've got this more detailed data, right off the bat, the model they're using to design their project is going to be more detailed, more accurate. And that will be helpful to everybody.
I understand, that gives them a better place to
So,
start.
Tommy, I'll be making calls to the Corps discussing this issue with them.
Sir,
I will be making some calls to the Corps and discussing this issue with them.
I'm not
We'll see.
trying to be negative and say no, but
No,
I
but-
just need to understand, what benefits.
We don't want
In
publicity,
addition-
we want
I don't mind at all working with the Corps. The Corps is a very good, very esteemed, very long-lived engineering agency. I am of the understanding that the Middle Tennessee section is a little bit insular in terms of collaboration, but that's just
I would agree with that
a little
statement.
bit.
insular.
They don't talk to each other?
But, well, no, they don't talk to each other. They don't necessarily. They'll talk internally with the Corps all day long. They don't necessarily talk to USGS or the U.S. Fish and Wildlife or to the state of Tennessee mapping department.
They don't play well with others.
They like to roll. They like to make their own. They've got their own silo.
That was on their report card, wasn't it?
Yeah, don't play well with others.
It's not that they're ugly about it or anything else. That's what I have heard through the grapevine.
That's been my experience as well.
But that all being said, they do very good engineering projects. So I'm not criticizing them.
I'd like to hear from Bobby, who's formerly the Mount View planner, and Miss Suzanne, whichever one wants to go first, get the dump on. We look at the information, just whatever you think, feel, just put it out there, either one of you. Bobby, you never had trouble speaking.
Well, the better data you got. I mean, garbage in, garbage out.
Sure.
Right? We're basing our development plans, if stormwater people are basing their permits on things that are 40 years old. And what do we expect? I mean, you know, we just hit or miss, we flip the coin here.
No, we're basing on something from 2010, correct?
I believe
A
so.
lot of it is, yes. Do that.
2010 and the National Hydrography, which can be as old as 40 or 50.
So one of the images that he had up here was showing the NHD and draws water overlaid together. And
He's backing up, give him a second to get there.
Yeah.
Okay.
so that has both of them on there. And I did the Wilson County Hydro in yellow, and I know that's not your typical mapping color for hydro, but I did that so that we could see.
Differentiate.
Yeah, differentiate between that and the 1 to 24,000, which is your topo map
Mm-hmm.
scale for your NHD.
Is that your blue?
And so that's the blue lines on there. And what the NHD has, which is really nice, is they've got stream names on the streams that have names. They've got connectivity, and they've got flow direction. So that way engineers can take that and they can model out, you know, if there's a blockage here, what's it going to impact? Where's the flow? How fast is it going to get downstream? That's what Corps of Engineers uses. That's what TPA uses. That's what private sector engineers use to do your floodplain mapping. You know, all the HEC-RAS and all that stuff that the engineer folks need to do. So what we've got here is your stream data, which looks similar to the same scale as the 1 to 24,000 data. However, they are different, okay? And you've got basically a siloed data set with your Wilson County data set. You know, you paid to have that done. It's great. It's been useful. But I talked to Julie about it too, and she said it didn't have flow direction, so she was having to go redo pieces of it to actually make it flow the right way, okay? And it's probably not connected, which means it's got disconnected pieces that either sink and then you don't have them connecting back up, so you can't really do a full catchment with that as well. So what we're doing with this 3DHP is taking this LiDAR data that is highly accurate elevation data that has been collected statewide over the past, 5 years or so. And from that, they can derive the low spots in that elevation, which are basically the streams or the wet weather conveyances. Are not all running wet streams all the time. But the detail of those streams is tremendous compared to this. And so that's the kind of information that will also go into further future modeling and stuff, even new floodplain boundaries. And I know those get updated periodically, and you need them
Yeah.
updated.
Well, at a practical level, if we have 50 lots or more in an area where base flood elevations have not been determined, but we know there's a floodplain, let's say it's a zone A, unnumbered. That means that FEMA has said there's a floodplain there, but they haven't really studied it.
Tom is laughing.
If so FEMA knows there's a floodplain there, but it hasn't been really studied,
I'll have to call you back in the meeting.
and we'll get 50 lots or more in a proposed
Okay.
subdivision.
Have-
We
have-
require-
Okay.
That engineer to model and develop enough floodplain data to establish what the base flood elevation across that neighborhood, that new neighborhood is going to be. And then they have to live by that, either by elevating the homes or by moving the development around to stay out of that modeled floodplain that they have now created. The advantage to this, again, is they would have more accurate data that they'd be starting with on their model.
Yes, and it would be a part of a federal data set that
Does
would
that
be.
make sense, Mike?
Yeah, it did. I was actually doing two things here.
Oh.
And it's a quicker solution than what we're doing with the core.
Well,
Not necessarily a
it's-
solution, but it's quicker
this is
results.
the data collection side of what the core is.
It's a
Right.
different solution with the code.
Yeah.
We're gonna try to find out what 2-inch rain is gonna do an hour versus 2-inch rain is gonna do in,
Yeah, we're actually
10
asking the
hours
Corps
here.
ultimately to model a
right.
particular watershed. This gives them, I guess, the more accurate data that the Corps also have to do on Spencer Creek.
The unknown for me is exactly the techniques and what the Corps would be using to collect their data. I feel pretty confident they'd be using our LiDAR data to begin with. But I don't really know that. But either way, they would likely have similar but a different way to derive the hydro than this program is, just because everybody does something a little different. So the 3DHP will have the standard that USGS is gonna be using nationwide. The core data from the LiDAR is gonna be the same, until it gets redone, reflown, recollected, or whatever. But everybody's starting out with the same, initial data set.
I will be doing some questions with them tomorrow or next day, whenever I get hold of them. Sometimes we can get hold of them, but I will be doing that. We'll be reporting back to committee on the next meeting, but this will enhance what they're doing, perhaps.
Perhaps,
With-
particularly in other watersheds if we
Right.
choose to go there.
Right.
Or even if we don't, it'll help other people who have to model, like in the practical application I just
And
gave
you all would have it too,
Yeah.
so it's just,
So then you see, where Spencer Creek gets wide up there, top left corner, see that, 180-degree curve right there?
Uh-huh.
Just before you get to it.
Before you get to the lake.
Before you get to the lake, before you get to the backwater. And I share with you, the backwater, it's all silted in, that's the reason water doesn't run out good, because the Corps needs to drain that, I mean, need to
Drain.
dredge it out real good. Tom, I'm getting in, buddy. Tom always corrects me, he's good at that. But
I don't mean
that, see
to,
that bend in right there's a road that runs across that.
Mhm.
Well, those cows swam across that, where you see the western, before it makes a turn, that's where the cows swim out across there. There's a bridge across, they went under the bridge, the bluff, the creek runs straight into the bluff and then makes a turn, which is backwater resistance, if you will, to the water flow right there. And everything that comes out of these tributaries runs there. So,
What's your timeline on needing our commitment if we decide to do this?
That's a good question. We're probably going to be looking at submitting a proposal in September timeframe. So I'm not sure what the county budgeting cycle is. If you're looking at
July 1, June 30.
no, I understand the fiscal year, but when does the budget get approved for
June.
FY
May,
June?
June.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
If you had it by then,
we
In other
would
words,
need
we
to
could
put
put
it in the
next year's budget.
yes.
I will call the Corps tomorrow. They have a committee, let's put this on hold until I can contact them and see what they're doing, and then we'll get back into further discussion, and if we need to go forward with the data. This is basically data collection.
It's just data. Yeah.
Yeah.
Simply, I mean, I
Well,
don't want to
Possible if we could
oversimplify
have
it,
somebody
but
from the Corps come, and have everybody here at the table. That way we're kind of getting
The
both
workshop.
sides. Yeah, if they can,
Yeah.
they can donate
So
something.
they know.
I'm not trying to hold up the Spencer Creek project at all.
We're not gonna hold it up.
Yeah,
We worked over 2 years.
yeah, we're committed.
Yeah.
So this is for,
This may,
this is kind of a separate project the way I'm looking at it.
this may enhance what we're trying to do. We're trying to do 5 big tributaries in the county, all told, and this may help us in the future. I do not
Can I
know.
ask a question?
But you, sure, Tommy, go ahead.
Most of the flooding problems me and you and the other commissioners deal with is not where new construction of whatever type has happened for the most part. It's where new construction has pushed water where it didn't go in the past. So will this data give you the ability to know where water is gonna go
No.
to prevent these things from happening? Does
If
that make
they,
sense?
if
Is
they
I- am I-
modify the water course, I'm not sure that
This,
this data is gonna do that unless you update it periodically.
Well, that's what I'm saying. And that's the majority of the calls you get, right, Gary?
what the Corps supposed to do is project build out.
I understand.
Where we are now
I
to
understand.
complete build out.
But there are areas, if you're being
Mhm.
honest, that it is and always have been a drainage problem. And
Oh,
yes,
absolutely.
new development may contribute to people's perception that it's getting worse somehow, but for instance, Cedar Grove Road is built pretty much on top of the creek. The square, even though it's not ours jurisdictionally, is built on top of the creek.
Creek runs under
The
the square.
sinkhole at Couchville
Oh, yeah.
has always flooded,
But that's my
and,
point.
If
we know the water is there, and we
Yeah.
can't pick the square up and move it,
no,
but if we allow something upstream or downstream, either one probably be on the downstream side, really, that will impede water from going away quicker. If we allow things of that nature to happen, that's what's creating our new problems.
yes, sir.
So, Well, if we have this data and the Corps' data, can we take it and say this project probably doesn't need to happen the way it's being presented because?
I don't know if you can say this project doesn't need to happen ever, but you might be able
Well,
to
what
get
I'm
the
saying,
project
as
modified.
presented,
Right,
is what I'm saying. But that will give you the information you need to
Yes.
say, here's why we don't wanna do this in this
yes,
way.
it could conceivably, yes, yes, sir.
I mean, I'm trying to look for the benefits of what it'll do for the citizens of the county,
Yes, sir.
Absolutely,
is
what
what I'm
we're all
trying to
about.
look for.
Now, and we can actually take this data, just as an example, and contract with somebody to establish our own local floodplains, which is where the rubber meets the road. Be cautious about that, because right now you've got FEMA to blame when something's in a floodplain and somebody don't like it. If you do it locally, that onus is on your back.
I mean, when you go and you see a home that's been there for years and years, it has water going to the garage or what have you underneath it, and it's never done it until XYZ over here was built.
Subdivision
I
A,
mean,
B.
I'm not an engineer at all and don't claim to be, but I am smart enough to know that water doesn't change itself like that without
Yes,
something causing it to happen.
Well, what you're saying is exactly what I've been preaching here for the last several years. You know, you build subdivision A and you're okay, subdivision B and you're okay. But you get to C, you're gonna impact part of, maybe we're gonna impact part of subdivision A that's built on the creek down there.
Just so all of y'all know though, my staff and my
And that's
goal
where my concern is.
for new development is to not let that happen. I mean, that's not like we're just sitting there closing our eyes and
But
saying,
that's what
yeah,
I'm
build
asking,
that.
this is
But
a tool you can
It's a
use
tool.
to help keep that from happening.
And that's,
Yeah.
It is.
I mean, that's my
the
main goal.
the current FEMA flood maps are also one of those things that's tools that
Mhm.
Tom would use to say, look, it's already been mapped as in a floodplain, don't build there, you know.
Right.
And what this data would do is help to, in those areas that you know are not as accurate, because a lot of those maps were basically just digitized from the old paper maps. There's no
Correct.
flood studies done on
That's
those.
correct.
And so you get a lot of things, and I know there's one over there near the fairgrounds where the creek looks like it runs straight through the middle of a field and it didn't follow, so who knows where they got that stream data from. But to me, that looks like the floodplain for FEMA is wrong, completely wrong in that area. But they didn't do a study. They didn't do a study. So that's where this data, once you have that information, it already is good data to feed into those studies that FEMA's contractors would be using. And Tom would be able to identify, look, this is an area of high density population, potential
Maybe
growth.
not Tom, but my engineer.
Yeah,
my
or whatever,
engineer.
and could say, hey,
Yeah.
the next available funds need to go to studying this area with FEMA and pulling out those new floodplains. And then they would have the good data, not only LiDAR, but the hydro data to do that with, to start that with. So that helps with that justification.
Most of the FEMA maps that I've seen, I mean, I'll tell you the story about them, but most of them pretty much carry you to the Noah flood. Seriously. And what we've been having is not Noah flood, we've been having localized events of terrible proportions.
Yeah.
In just local areas that's just flooded from here downstream.
Mhm.
And not next street over in many cases. And that's what we gotta be able to predict and project so that the planning commission doesn't approve places in a hole, if you follow what I'm saying, Tom.
I do.
So. Further discussion from the committee.
Is there anything else y'all need to show us, Dennis or Suzanne?
No, I think I've gone through all the material. So yeah, I appreciate your interest and your questions. I always learn things when I get out of Nashville and meet with local folks. It's been my pleasure to talk with y'all this evening, and
That's right.
hope that we can. If you have more questions after tonight, we'd be happy to entertain those as well.
Dennis, is that presentation available?
Sure, I can email it to Tom, and then you can share it
Yeah,
with the group.
sure.
Yeah.
I'll be happy
That'd be good, I think.
Any other questions, comments, whatever? Just to share, as I said earlier, I'll get with the Corps people and see exactly how they're gonna put this together. If they're using, the LiDAR or whatever, then I'll get back with you guys and we'll discuss it in a future meeting and just see which way we wanna go and what the benefits would be of.
Again, I'm not necessarily interested in getting the Corps to hold up and use this data when it comes available in a year and a half, for the Spencer Creek watershed. What I'm interested in is, well, the question I would like to know from the Corps is, if we had this data, could they use it in lieu of them, us having to pay them additional money
Exactly.
to remodel? That's the question I
We
specifically
will
want
ask
to
them
know.
that question. I'll call, get an appointment time, I'll come to your office, we'll
Okay,
call them jointly, find,
all right.
see if we can seek an answer. And I was just sitting here thinking, as you were talking there, Tom, all of the stuff we'll try to do is bring us up to the here and now. But in
Yes, sir.
10 years from now, with the growth we're having and the lack of bridges we're building, in some cases like Wind Lane, all this gonna change. And we just gonna have to stay on top of it.
Well,
Let it go
that's in
forward.
part why I went ahead.
Pardon?
That's in part why I eventually, and Bobby will tell you, relented and did the, proposed the density
Mhm.
amendment that is gonna be a little bit controversial probably going down. But,
In other words, you're getting us into another gun battle.
well, the reason I am is because I'm
Well,
trying
sorry.
to buffer,
All for it.
or tamper down some of the growth concerns that y'all have brought forward in the past year and a half, 2
We-
years.
Yes, we have a terrible growth
Whether it be
problem.
Tommy or Jerry or
We're
Bobby or
exploding.
whomever.
Even with the,
And Suzanne lives here. I don't know where you live, Suzanne, but I know you live in Muscatine.
Probably your neighbor. I live up in Friendship, near the Friendship area.
did you get a visa before you moved down there?
Well,
No.
She registered at the Possumtown International
Where-
Airport,
where-
from what I understand.
Refugee or a missionary?
Where do you live?
It's Gunnisman Lake.
Buckshot.
It's not living in last week.
Buckshot Court.
Buckshot.
Where is that?
It's,
Buckshot Court, it's off
off
of,
Man Road.
yeah,
Oh, God.
I'm right close.
You are
Carly
a
Estate.
neighbor.
Clay
Carly
Estate.
Estates.
You gotta get
She-
your
she-
man about
she-
the politics a little
she-
better, Mr. Jerry.
She's a little more distant from me, you know, so. I will follow up on it, Mr. Core, you and I will. My concern is the changing and to share with Dennis, we got a place right now that Floods had an event, same event where the Gallon Cup took a swimming lesson across the creek. And, on Gwen Lane, and this man is with our road department, I was standing on the deck of that one lane bridge, and water was at the deck, making photographs of it. And at the same time, our school system was wanting to build 20 acres of school and 20 acres of parking lot right upstream from there. So it's just, and that's what I'm saying, gonna skew our numbers, not your numbers, everything we gotta take into consideration.
Sure.
Because that was environmental
I was
services.
just drawing a blank. I know what you're talking about.
Do we have any other business for the committee? We'll pick this up next time around, get a little core data. Do we have a,
Motion to adjourn.
we have a motion to adjourn? Stand adjourned. Thank y'all.